everybody knows like what is healthy versus what is not healthy, but what in your brain is holding you back from doing it?
Why is it that we're still having this conversation over and over, that we know what to do, but we're not doing it?
Really about adjusting people's mindsets and giving them a visualization of what their life could be if they were able to make these changes and compare it to what is currently going on with them.
You hold yourself accountable. You're building in that accountability of like, I'm going to take a walk with my friend.
Why is it the Happy Human podcast? Is because I think a lot of people want to be happy, and we're mostly for humans, not animals.
I would hope.
Yeah, and one thing that I know from personal experience and as a dad is that there are no humans that are happy if they're not pooping in a potty.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So we got to talk about poop. And listeners, if you're playing along or listening along, we have a little game. We're going to see how many times we say the word poop in today's episode. We're at 3. Seema, why are we going to talk about poop so much today?
Poop is important. I think poop is a really, really important indication of how healthy you are. And, like, I'm not very happy when I'm not, when I'm not pooping. Sorry. I'm just not. I think it's important.
And, there's a lot of talk these days about the gut-brain axis, right? So we wanted to bring someone on who is a certified expert in this area. Mm-hmm. And we have none other than Gutsy Girl MD on Instagram and the socials. And her name is Dr. Supriya Rao. Dr. Rao, Supriya, welcome to the show. We're looking forward to chatting with you about all things that can make us happy and healthy and human.
And poopy humans.
By focusing, and poopy humans.
Poopy humans.
Yeah, we don't want to poop anywhere, right? I've learned that you're not happy if you're pooping anywhere. You got to poop in a potty.
In a potty, yes.
Yeah. Supriya,
thanks so much for
welcome.
Me on. Thank you very much, Dinesh and Seema. I'm so excited to be here and discuss one of my favorite topics. It's a hot topic at all times in my household, so...
I'm sure. Like when I married into the Desai family, they love to talk about poop, and I was mortified. Like I could not at the dinner table, anywhere and everywhere they would talk about poop. And the funny thing is nobody in that family is a GI doc. So I can only imagine for you what the dinner conversations are going to be like.
Yeah, 2 GI docs in the family. My kids are very comfortable talking about anything and everything. So
yeah. But you're not just a GI doc. You're a mom. You're a holistic health coach. You share about mindset, meditation. And I'm not sure if it's public knowledge. We can edit it out if it's not. But you're also a financier for a movie.
Right? It's public knowledge at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, so we won't edit it out. But you're involved in the movie business. And one of the things, the whole entire Happy and Human podcast is all about bringing South Asians that are doing exceptional things, talking to them about their expertise, peeling the layers back so we can share some wisdom and inspiration with other people and with us, and also amplify what you're doing in this world. And hopefully together we can make a bigger impact. So with that, Seema, why don't you take us through a little bit of your origin story with Dr. Supriya, and our conversation will get going.
Yeah, so I think for a while there, when I first got on social media, I was telling myself this story that, like, what am I doing? No self-respecting doctor gets on social media, right? Like, that's not a thing. That's for Paris Hilton. That's for, fashion bloggers. And it was really something that kind of played with my own sense of self-worth and stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and there were other doctors, I think, but they were from the younger generation, like, right, the people that were in residency, not people that had already been practicing for 15, 10, 20 years. And I think
the kids, they're on the social media. The kids are on the social media.
Kids are on social. I don't do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was kind of playing with my mind, but when the pandemic hit, it was just incredible to see so many other docs coming out and talking about their health expertise and this and that and the other, and I think social media sort of facilitates people who you've already karmically met in another life. Like, that's just kind of my personal. So, because when I connected with Supriya, Supriya, I don't remember how we got connected, but we found each
I
other.
think one of us DM'd each other. I think that's what it was. I think I
Yeah.
was drawn to your page because all the yoga and everything, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this woman seems really cool. So
Right back at you, right? And it was one of those weird instant connections where you're like, this is my person, right? I have to say, Supriya and I don't talk every day, but I would say we're besties. And, it just sort of developed from there. We did some stuff together on Instagram, right? Like,
yeah, we did a bunch of lives and like kind of like series about kind of yoga and gut health, and like we did a lot of
That's amazing.
things together.
Yeah. And I just thought when we started the podcast, like, I think it's so important that we talk about poop because it's such a measurable indicator of health and really how our mindset's affecting it. But importantly, I think I am, to use Ross from Friends as a quote, I'm indignant as a consumer. I'm indignant as a consumer of medical education because when we were going through school, I have dissected out the vagus nerve. I have seen the body from the inside out. I've held body parts. I've, had attendings quiz me and pimp me on what things do and how they work. And nowhere in that medical education was, yes, this regulates your gut. This regulates your heart rate. This regulates, but what does that actually mean from a curative and preventive standpoint, which is why we should be in medicine to begin with, right? Like, so it's not something they talk about. We don't talk about the gut, the brain in the gut. We don't talk about the brain in the heart. We only talk about the brain as a singular thing. So Supriya, I know I've sort of monopolized the mic here, but please come in and dispel this myth and share all wonderful things that you have about poop and mindset and just everything. Tell us all the things.
Sure. So I 100% agree. Like, when I was in medical school, I think our nutrition course was like 3 days. And so to learn all of nutrition and what is good for you in 3 days out of the entire thing. And as a GI physician in fellowship, the gut is where you are kind of like getting all this nutrition. I didn't have any, teaching when it came to that. I don't think medical schools and, training programs around the country have anything with that still, even though we are now kind of in 2024. I think it is slowly starting to become a little bit more mainstream than it was. It's still, I feel still a little fringe, honestly, even talking about it. But prevention, healthy lifestyle, mindset, all of these things are what I am now teaching my patients, because I can, and I have for the first like several years of my GI practice, patients would come in, I would, in a very kind of like lecture type fashion, be like, okay, these are the 4 things you need to do. Please, here's what you need to do, and come back in 6 months and let's see how it goes. And most of the time, like nothing changed. And especially when it came, like people take their medications, I would say, but when it comes to changing lifestyle and changing habits, that is really tough. So my journey honestly began when I was seeing a lot of patients for fatty liver, which is kind of like an indication of metabolic disease. And I would say, okay, you need to lose weight. So why don't you go on a diet, exercise, and come back and let's see how you do. Maybe your liver enzymes will improve. And I was finding that nobody was able to do anything with that very terrible advice. And so I started kind of looking more into like, okay, how do I educate myself? How do I improve myself in order to be more, efficient, more helpful to my patients? And so I did obesity medicine certification. I did lifestyle medicine certification. I started teaching lifestyle medicine classes in my practice now that I do after hours, in order to like help change mindset, because like everybody knows like what is healthy versus what is not healthy, but what in your brain is holding you back from doing it, and what exactly is necessary for people to realize the habits that they've kind of developed over the last several decades, think about what helps them and serves them, and then able to either disrupt that habit, break it, and then start something new. How does somebody do that? And it's been quite a learning experience for me. I've been doing these classes since 2022 with one of my nurse practitioners, and every group I always meet that those first 3 weeks when I'm teaching the class, I'm hitting up against like total, I don't think I can change. I don't like this very difficult path forward for patients, but something clicks after a while when they realize the education that they learn about what it means about gut health and heart health and brain health and all of these things, and what they are currently doing, and how, like, why do they come to that class? Obviously something is not going well. Either they're diabetic, they have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all these different things. So they realize, okay, whatever I've been doing so far isn't working. What can I change about my lifestyle now? What preventative things can I do before I become from pre-diabetic to a full diabetic? Like all these different things. And then when people go through these classes, they realize, oh wow, by adopting a healthy lifestyle, not only maybe I'll lose some weight, but I'm also feeling better from a mental aspect. I'm going to the bathroom a lot, I'm pooping a lot better. I don't have the pains I used to have. My acid reflux is better. My bloating is better, all these different things. And it's really about adjusting people's mindsets and giving them a visualization of what their life could be if they were able to make these changes and compare it to what is currently going on with them.
Yeah.
That is all absolutely true, and I'm embarrassed to say that I came to that much later in my life, the understanding the connection with food and how I felt, both like emotionally and mentally. And I'm not sure, Seema, if you know this, but for many years, I suffered from severe migraines, like from the time of 15 to probably about, I don't know, 36. I would have 19 migraines or more per month. And I got tired. At one time I was seeing a neurologist, and I kid you not, I was taking like 15 pills at 3 times a day. Things like Dopamax, right? And Flexeril, like muscle relaxers, and Neurontin, all this different stuff I was just taking, and none of it was working. That I ended up also taking the rescues. I was taking Imitrex on top of it, and so it got so bad to a point in my life where I said, to hell with all of the medicines designed to prevent the migraines because they weren't working. I was going to take the Imitrex the night before every night, and then I would wake up, and that's not good for your heart, right? And the thing that got me off is, you probably know the name I'm about to say. Dr. Vikram Raya was running Vitology Institute, my first foray into functional medicine. And that's where I learned about leaky gut. And that's where I learned about, changing my diet and what that could do, and, supplementation in the right way. And then I worked with Dr. Kian Vu out of LA, and I don't get migraines any longer. Right. And it primarily was everything that you just said: diet, stress, and working on sort of like some of the foundational things that we know. So I want to jump right into two things. The first is what Seema started with is, you're crushing it. You're an amazing GI doctor. You're a managing partner of your group right now, right? What led you to put yourself out on social media? And the follow-up question to that is what you mentioned, is that we all know what we should do. Even as adults, we know what we should do. And for ages, right, there's a quote out there that, man will sacrifice their health for money and then spend all their money to buy back their health. I mean, that quote is older than all of us combined. Why is it that we're still having this conversation over and over, that we know what to do, but we're not doing it?
So let me start with the social media one. So I think in the year before the pandemic, I had kind of toyed with getting out there on social media, putting myself out there, because I really did feel like patients were coming in with their Google searches and their weird testing that they did. And it was very frustrating for me. And I think that's what even led me to even think about it. And then the pandemic hit, and then I was like, you know what? All of like the endoscopy centers are closed. I have a little bit of time. And I actually started just putting stuff out there about COVID initially and just how it was affecting physicians and whatnot. But then I realized that as I was kind of going through Instagram and like other platforms a little bit more, and I realized how much pseudoscience there was out there by people who weren't certified in any way. They weren't physicians, they weren't nutritionists, they weren't, researchers in the field, and they were just some kind of made up name that they would give themselves. But they had all these people listening to them and often getting really, unsubstantiated advice. And so that kind of made me feel like, you know what, I need to be a voice of reason out here in all of the snake oil. And so I think And then I started finding some people who were like-minded as well, and that gave me a little confidence. But I definitely was very hesitant to put myself out there because it's not something we do. We're not taught, especially, going through big academic centers and training. At least, Instagram is not a place that people would even say, you should be on, and to be
maybe
able to educate
LinkedIn,
people.
right?
Yeah.
Like maybe LinkedIn, if anything,
maybe Twitter,
but
and
maybe
meant Twitter a little bit.
Yeah, but definitely not the gram.
Yeah, definitely not Instagram. I just felt like, you know what? I think I have something to offer. I think, what I'm trying. And that was the start of my kind of introducing lifestyle medicine, preventative medicine, talking about obesity medicine, in addition to gut health and how it's all interrelated and overlaps. And then I just kind of put myself out there very hesitantly. And then just would think about, I was very kind of disorganized about it, but would just think about something and put it out there. And every day I would ask my husband, do you think this is okay? Is this weird to post out there? Oh my God. I had like so much anxiety over it, and I wish I hadn't, because like, who cares? But that's where patients started finding me, and, colleagues started finding me. And I found a really great community of physicians and, other health, professionals on social media, including SEMA, and got into the whole coaching thing, and like realized not only it's great that I have these two pillars in addition to being a gastroenterologist, obesity medicine, lifestyle medicine, but I really need to be able to help people change their mindset. Lecturing people and being super draconian about what they need to do in life is not the way to win them over. And it doesn't work. Like I said, people know what they're supposed to do. To have you being on top of them and saying, you really need to do this. If you don't do this, you're going to die. Things like that. It's not helpful. And I think as physicians, unfortunately, we are just basically taught, take these medications and try it. And so another reason I've gotten into it is that a lot of the medications we use for irritable bowel syndrome, for example, don't work for everybody. And so to just put medications on people that have significant side effects at times and may or may not help patients, I think is really tough to sell to a patient. And so to really push the lifestyle, to push what they're eating, really find out what it is that is at the heart of what's going on. And some people, I found out that they've had like severe sexual trauma and other things that have come out by actually being able to spend it. But it's hard, right? Because you're in a very short appointment time. So to try and get to the bottom of all of that is really difficult. But it's important to know what motivates people and what their values are and what their strengths are, because they can tap into that to start making changes in their life.
Yeah, I think, Supriya, you touched on something that, again, is probably another entire podcast episode, right? But like, I see it with us as providers within the system, or any system we're in, right? The system is quote unquote broken, and also the system is comprised of individuals. So we have power as individuals to change what we do on a singular level, right? Like on a micro level that eventually will affect systemic change. And it's bi-directional, right? System supports the individual, individual supports the system. And so when we go in and we're seeing patients and we're like, I've got 10 minutes with this one and I've got to go to the next one, right? Like it doesn't facilitate healthy, open conversation. It's difficult to create trust, especially when you go in and you're saying like, all right, you just got to muscle up, buttercup, and do these things. But what you touched on really here importantly is the type of food choices, right? Like there's so much processed food available legally here in this country. We were, Dinesh and I were in Italy over the summer together, and I noticed how little of the crap was actually available. And if it was available, you were paying for it, like more than the fresh stuff. But that's not true here. And so these people not knowing better, thinking like this is widely available, so it must be okay to consume the soda and the this and the that. And then they're here and they're in your office and they're wondering why they feel like poop. It's causing all sorts of, I remember your story about how important sleep is to this one patient, the marathon runner that you were telling me about that, was working on feeling better, and sleep was a big component. But food impacts sleep impacts health. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So you're like you said earlier, Seema, being able to have a good poop is like one of life's greatest feelings, I would say personally,
Yes.
because people who come into my office and don't poop well, like they just are miserable. They are miserable. They have either if they're having like diarrhea or like severe constipation. Like I've had patients who don't have a bowel movement in like 2 or 3 weeks. And my heart breaks for them because that to me would be so hard to deal with. And so to figure out again, like what is going on, what they're eating, and like you mentioned, like the amount of processed food that's available in this country and readily available and inexpensive is
Mm-hmm.
really what is kind of fueling our obesity epidemic, our issues with depression, the mental health issues that we have in this country, and just what it's leading to all these issues with healthcare spending because of chronic medical illness that takes into effect,
Mhm.
decades after you start eating this food, but definitely earlier nowadays than it used to
Mm-hmm.
be. And so I think changing the way that food systems are health equity or food equity, I think,
Food
and
equity.
healthy food um, is really, really important because all of these widely available sodas, like, I mean, a lot of people end up shopping at their convenience store or the bodega down the street and
Mm-hmm.
like trying to figure out what those healthy foods are. And people just don't have that knowledge. It's not taught anywhere. Their kids don't learn it in school. And so these
Mm-hmm.
habits are starting from such a young age about drinking juice, drinking soda, drinking or eating, chips as a snack, as opposed to really being able to have access or knowledge that eating fresh fruits and vegetables is much better. And that fiber
Mm-hmm.
is what is actually one of the most important macronutrients that we
Mhm.
can have in our diet.
Mm-hmm.
And because that fiber is what stimulates the health of our gut. So our gut microbiome, the bacteria and organisms that live in our gut, they feed off of that fiber, they ferment it, and that leads to production of substances which helps maintain the integrity of our gut, which helps prevent inflammation, which helps our immune system. Like most of our immunity comes from our gut. It helps our mood. So like, stress, anxiety, if you're not eating a healthy diet, can be linked to a lot of what you're eating, what your sleep is like, if
Mm-hmm.
you're exercising. All of these, it just comes back down to those basics. But lifestyle is not sexy, like it's not as
Yeah.
sexy as some other things. And so putting that work in and really thinking about what you can do is important. But I know it's hard because I think our society is also not set up to be healthy. We don't
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
we don't put emphasis on health. We put emphasis on work, and we put
Mm-hmm.
emphasis
Mhm.
on you know getting, being a hustler and like doing all these things, which is important, but at the risk of what are we doing to our health in order to gain those things?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, so Supriya, one of the things that I've always thought about is that there is a segment of the population and a segment of our listeners for whom some of the things we talk about is just out of reach. It's just not possible due to their life circumstances that cannot be immediately changed. And McDonald's is, or fast food is something that they have to rely on, or other
Mhm.
things like that. But one of the things that worries me about this podcast and other, types of platforms like this is that there is a segment of listeners who are in the position of where they can make a better choice, right? They can reach for um, water instead of a Diet Coke, right? But they're still not doing it. And then they listen to a show like this or a YouTube, or they see something
Mhm.
and they're reminded that that's what they should be doing, but they can't do it. And then they feel bad about themselves. And, we all know that when you're making decisions from that place of where you're beating yourself up, you're not going to make good decisions. Just like if you're hungry and you're looking in the pantry, you're not going to pick, a green leafy salad. You're going to pick
Right,
the thing
right,
that gives you the energy right away, because biologically that's how we're programmed, right? To
right,
get the glucose into us right away.
right.
So what and Seema said something that was really insightful, in that there's a system out there, but we're all parts of the system, discrete parts. What would you say to that person who can make a better choice but isn't making the better choice, to empower them once and for all to start with just a 1% shift
Mhm.
and have faith that allowing time to do its thing, that 1% shift could mean a difference between, life and death, to be dramatic, but just a better sleep or a better poop.
I think that person needs to understand what their why is.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I want to make this change? So you're sitting listening to this podcast, you feel like your habits aren't where you want them to be. Why do you want to change? What will you gain by changing? Because if you're able to identify that why, you will be able to make those changes. If you can't think about it, I think it's important to go through the exercise that we do in coaching, where you sit down, you write out what your values are, you write out what your strengths are, you write out what your life could be like if you make these changes. So we do, it's like a visualizing exercise. We have patients or clients like close their eyes and really visualize what it could be for them to be healthy, what they would feel like if they were eating healthy food, if they were getting enough sleep, if they were exercising every day, being active, if they didn't have stress in their life that was overwhelming. And so once they're able to visualize it, they come up with, why do I need to do this? Who do I need to do this for? So is it like my kids, because my knees hurt because, I just can't move very well? Or is it being able to, again, not have pain, be able to run around with my grandkids, be able to get off medications because I don't want to be on them for, many years? Is it, just having a better sense of myself? So I think understanding what that why is, feeling more energy, just feeling like you're comfortable in your own skin again. If you can figure out what that why is, you will be able to make these changes. And then we start with what's called SMART goals, which are these goals that are attainable. They're small, but they're sustainable. And so, for example, like if you start off an exercise program and say, you know what, I'm going to strength train every single day and for an hour each day, I think like going from 0 to 100 is really difficult. So I think, saying that, you know what, I'm going to walk at work on my lunch break for 30 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday with my friend. And I think if you're able to be very specific about what that goal is, measure it, it's something that's actionable, realistic, I think is really important, and time bound. And so that SMART goal will, and once you're able to achieve that, then you have kind of like this self-reliance, like, wow, I can do things. And then you can add another SMART goal to it. And so it's like these very small, digestible packets of goals in your life that I think will help people make that 1% shift. But it has to stem from your why. Why do you want to do this?
Yeah.
What will change for the better in your life if you do this thing?
Yeah. And I love that you talked about, habit stacking, essentially. Like at this time, I eat lunch every day at X time, right? So I'm going to right after lunch or right before lunch or whatever. That's something that is really, really effective. And again, when you hold yourself accountable, you're building in that accountability of like, I'm going to take a walk with my friend or something. It's nice to be out there and move and have accountability and build in a reasonable amount of action that you can physically take. I think a lot of health goals, for example, when you look at metrics, I just had my labs done, right? A1C and CBC and all that stuff. But you can't feel what your cholesterol is. You can't feel necessarily that you're hypertensive. And so when you pick a goal, like I'm going to take a walk, or I'm going to drink my whole thing of water, or I'm going to have 100 grams of greens every day at dinner, something. Those are things you physically can see. You can see the greens disappear. You can see that you're peeing more, or that's just more tangible, right? So I think that's the other aspect that I heard you share as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And that's why, like, so fatty liver, high cholesterol, diabetes, well, diabetes over time you'll feel, but all of those things people don't feel. Like fatty liver, no one knows what that is. Like no one knows how that feels. It doesn't feel like anything until over time, when it starts scarring your liver and causing irreversible damage, then it gets to the point where you're in trouble. But because you don't necessarily feel those things, but if your labs are telling you one thing, that may be why, that may be a why for somebody. Like they see, my parents had all these issues. I'm starting to see these things. I don't want to be that.
Right.
Doesn't have to be your destiny. We know that like your DNA doesn't rule your life. It can make you certainly more susceptible in some ways, but we know that our lifestyle can turn off genes. And so
Yeah.
whatever you're doing in your lifestyle is really important. So I think having those actionable steps, habit stacking, figuring out your why, those are all like necessary components to being successful with changing your lifestyle.
Yeah, so good. And some of the things that I like, my deepest wish for people is to, and for everyone, myself included, is to understand that you're capable of much more than you think you're capable of, right? And we've talked about this. Instead of an or conversation, live in the land of and, right? And having gone through various journeys and with full acknowledgement to all the privileges that we all share, and certain privileges that may not be accessible to everyone. Deep down, I believe that for all of us, when we try something new, our brain will go to work in finding all of the reasons why we can't do those things and why it won't work, and try to discourage us from trying it. But the confidence comes from the evidence in doing it. And like you said, making a small shift and sticking with it and proving to yourself that you can make that small shift is really the root, is really the foundation of how we can get from point A to point B. And if we don't take this seriously today in our 20s, and we don't take it seriously in our 30s, and we don't take it seriously in our 40s, time is ticking, and we're going to pay the price later. And we have to stop borrowing from tomorrow to make today easier. Right. Yeah. We just have to. We cannot borrow from our 60-year-old self to make our 30-year-old self get to the office 15 minutes earlier. Right. Or to have 2 hours more of fun because we wanted to take 4 shots that night. It just isn't, it's not sustainable. And in the moment, we don't realize that.
Yeah. I think I've had some, things in my personal life where family members were ill, and seeing that how everything stops when you're sick. Nothing else happens. And so at that moment, you really realize how much health is paramount, health is key. And so if you do not take care of your health, it doesn't matter how much money you make, what you're doing. If you do not prioritize your health, it's going to come back and really hurt you.
Yeah. So speaking of health, what is a good poop? Like, how often should we be going? What should it feel like? There's a whole, I know Dr. B from Fiber Fueled, you introduced me to him. He talks about consistency, right? And what does consistency tell you about what's going on with your gut? So tell us about what a good poop is, so we know. And then also talk a little bit about the brain that exists in our gut.
Sure. So there's actually a stool scale. It's called the Bristol stool scale. We actually have pictures of it in our office in each exam room. So patients, when they're looking at it, they're like, it's number 3. And so it basically runs the gamut of kind of these hard pellet looking, we're going to get into it, guys, by the way, these hard pellet looking things, basically to what looks like complete water, right? That's from going from 1 to 6. And so obviously those two, outliers, you do not want that. You want kind of a healthy sausage looking style, bowel movement. And in terms of frequency, I think, if you're pooping, a couple times a day up to once every 3 days, that's considered healthy. Pooping less than, once, a week, or, I would say at least you need to be going at least twice a week, for sure. And feeling like you have a complete bowel movement, because some people say they have one, but then they have to go back a couple hours later and all this that's not the way, because that also means that maybe your pelvic floor is having issues, and you're not able, the muscles are not working in a coordinated fashion to help you have a good bowel movement. So because pooping is a very well orchestrated dance, there are certain muscles that have to relax, there are certain muscles that have to contract, there are nerve endings that kind of turn you on to like, oh, I need to use the bathroom. So making sure you're paying attention to those cues, having all of those muscles do what they need to do, and to have a bowel movement, it's like a very well coordinated effort. And so if something goes wrong in any of those things, like you're not going to feel good and not have like a proper bowel movement. If you're eating super highly processed foods, a lot of patients end up having either severe constipation or diarrhea. Obviously, a lot of medications that people take have side effects and can cause it. In terms of color, brown, green, those are all fine. It becomes worrisome when you see black tarry stools, because that means that you could be bleeding from somewhere in your upper GI tract. If you see red blood stools, obviously like that could be hemorrhoids or something more concerning like colon cancer or leaky blood vessels. White stools are scary because it could be a biliary obstruction, because bile is what makes our poop brown. And so if your bile is being obstructed, is it because there's a potential pancreatic cancer that could be there? So yeah, but any range of like brown, green, yellowish, like those are all fine. And like I said, having a bowel movement like a couple times a day up to once every 3 days is fine. And eating a lot of fiber, getting 30 to 40 grams of fiber every day is really important to having those good complete bowel movements. And then in terms of like the brain gut axis, so I always wondered why my patients who came in with abdominal pain, bloating, just discomfort, they also had, a lot of them had this overlap of brain fog and just they were on antidepressants and anxiety and all these things. And, over time you realize that there are millions and millions of nerve endings in the gut. And so when those nerve endings are disrupted for any reason, because you've got dysbiosis, which is kind of like this imbalance of good versus bad bacteria in your gut, those don't just affect your GI tract. They affect your overall just psyche, and like it's a bidirectional system between your gut and your brain. And so your gut is sending, messages to your brain saying like, things aren't going well down here. My motility is not good. I'm constipated. I'm bloated, this and that. And then your brain is kind of like thinking that message. And then it's saying, yeah, this doesn't feel good. I'm going to send you a message of pain. And so then you've got pain associated with it. And so it can get into this vicious cycle. Whereas if you are able to eat and exercise and do all the things that are necessary for a healthy lifestyle, you're going to start seeing some of that brain fog lifting. Some people notice that, especially with exercise, because exercise releases a lot of, neurotransmitters and endorphins in your gut, which then cycle back to your brain being like, wow, this feels good. And so I feel good. And so a lot of those anxious feelings may improve. But what you eat really does affect your mood. It really does. For myself, like, I think I eat pretty healthy overall, but every so often there's something sugary somewhere and you end up eating it. And for those like 5 seconds, you feel, oh, this is amazing. I feel so good. I love, chocolate or, whatever your, thing is. And then like literally 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God, why did I do that? Like all the sugar is like hitting me. My gut feels great. Oh, now I've got a headache. Like, it's like all of these things that start happening to me. And I'm just, it's amazing. And I still do it, which is crazy. Which
Oh my
just
gosh.
shows the effect sugar is on the brain. Like, and our sugar, like it hits receptors that are similar to like opioid receptors, but much less, potent, I guess. But it still hits those things. And you're just like, wow, like I know I'm going to feel terrible. And yet I still did it.
Yeah, it's so crazy. So all 3 of us are on KMAC right now. Like we're all in the program.
We are?
All 3 of us.
Oh.
And so a couple weeks ago, it's a real dietary shift, right? It had only been a couple of weeks to just kind of prove to listeners, or like to show listeners, it doesn't take a long time for your body to start clearing the trash. And so even with me eating cleanly, just bringing more attention to what I was putting in my body, when I was putting it in my body, and under like, if I'm like stressed out when I'm eating versus if I like take a moment and be grateful and really get into being mindful with my eating. I know we did a whole thing about this, Supriya. It shifts the whole experience. So what happened was I'm on this new way of eating, and then I craved pizza. So we ordered pizza on our way, like it was a Sunday. We were coming back from the Monday. And I'm like, you know what, guys, it's my birthday week. We're going to order pizza. And just what you said, Supriya, it felt awesome in the first couple of minutes. And it was like, oh, I missed this so much. And then I felt like poop, absolute like headaches. I had to take a nap. Like the kids were like, what happened? And I don't know.
This is actually,
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Like I see it now. And so the patients who I teach in these lifestyle medicine classes, a lot of them are very, their diets are very meat heavy and processed food heavy and soda heavy and whatnot. And so those first initial weeks, like making the change is really difficult. But then over time, actually, we just had a class like, we teach them on Tuesdays and Thursdays, actually all week. But on Tuesday when I was teaching, they said, one of them said, I had pizza or some other, kind of, unhealthy food. And they're like, it was awesome. And then I felt terrible. Yeah. And I realized that people's taste buds change over time. The way they feel, like your body adjusts really quickly. They're like, oh my God, thank you. And then when you go back to some of those old behaviors, you pay for it in a very tangible way. And
absolutely,
it's been kind of mind blowing to see it for those patients and also myself. Like, I think I eat pretty healthy. But then again, like every so often, if I do something, I'm reminded very clearly, like, we do not want this. And alcohol actually been that
alcohol.
Lately,
oh gosh.
Yeah, alcohol definitely. And I'm grateful for that reminder because it teaches me now that I have my own internal barometer to right the ship when I'm straying off. Right. So just like you guys, last night was Friday night and I was thinking about having a tequila, and I was like, you know what? I don't need it that much. Like I was just going to sip on a tequila because I was going to come down to my office and do some work. And the reminder of, it's not worth the price to pay tomorrow because we have a full day. And I know that I'm going to have an outsized reaction because I haven't had a drink in, 3 months or something.
Right.
But I've got one question for you, and no one has asked me this question, but I'm going to ask it on behalf of every woman on the planet. And that question is, what can I do, either overtly or directly or indirectly or covertly, to help the man in my life with his gas? It's a serious question, guys. I don't know what you're laughing about. This
because we're thinking about our own husbands. That's what it's like.
Yeah.
I think, besides changing diet, because I think if you're eating Taco Bell and like all of those kinds of things, like if you eat a lot of meat, like I'm sorry, it's just not going to end well for anybody.
So it's the meat.
It's meat. Like, yeah, it's like my husband calls it like the meat sweats and the meat farts. Like, so he was a very his diet used to be extremely meat heavy when we first met. But he is he halved his LDL. Like it went completely by becoming essentially plant-based with me. If we go out to eat and there's something that he likes that he would rather have, then he goes for it. But otherwise, like at home and everything, we're plant-based. But so besides changing your diet, I would say one thing is movement after eating. I think that a lot of us, we eat and then we sit. And when we sit, we get bloated and things just kind of hang out there. But if you take a walk, even for a 10 or 15 minute walk after eating, your gut is going to be moving. Everything's going to be moving. And instead of sitting and having increased gas and bloating, you'll actually have a bowel movement instead. So that movement after eating is super important, again, for both just overall feeling good about it and then just your gut motility.
Yeah. I think it's actually something I've heard within Ayurveda, right? Like that's a whole other thing, right? How are you positionally eating, right? To sit. Yeah. There's a reason that we as Indians, we sit cross-legged and we sit on the floor. Right. There's a whole reason behind doing that. And then one of the things that Ayurveda talks about is getting up and moving. So super helpful.
We don't move enough as a country. We don't move enough as a species. And I think that, sitting, this has been said before, sitting is the new smoking. And so, when I'm in the office, actually, I realize when going from my office to an exam room, I think is 10 steps. So it's really it's bad. So I'm actually getting a walking pad for my office. instead of sitting.
KMAC exposed that for me.
Yeah.
I thought I moved fine. I had no idea. And, this is my office. I do all my work here. It's in my basement. And when I go up, I get lunch or I get a drink or another water. I come down. I'm at 1,700 steps for the day, right? And it's 8:00 at night. And so that quickly, KMAC exposed that very quickly. Yeah. And then I started with taking calls on a walk, but then it's winter in the Northeast. Right. And so just recently I set up a treadmill with a desk. And I find that, if I just in my head say I'll do 15 minutes 3 or 4 times a day, that's about 3 miles, 3 or 4 miles I can get in. Right. And about a mile is about 2,000 steps. And, the rest of it can get there. So I'm a big fan of Shark Tank. And on Shark Tank, exactly where this is going. They have this product they had a couple of years ago called a Squatty Potty, right? Yep. And my first time in India, I remember there wasn't a Western toilet. There was a hole in the ground. So
we all grew up with that.
Yeah. So is there a optimal pooping position? Or can't even keep a straight face, but is there an optimal pooping position?
See, I can. Nothing phases me.
I love it. And is our Western toilet a optimal, optimized pooping position? And I got so many questions. And as you answer that, talk about bidet versus toilet paper.
All right. Oh my gosh, I love all of it, and I have answers for all of it. So. Growing up, going back to India, with my parents, like you said, there were no Western toilets. It was squatting with those 2 things around a hole. And that is the best way to poop. That honestly, squatting is the best way, which is why, the Western way, sitting on this toilet, it seems more comfortable, but it actually changes the angle at which you poop. And by changing that angle, you're actually straining more and can over time cause more issues. So the Squatty Potty, which is in homes all across the U.S., including my own, changes that angle back to what it should be. And
is that angle called the launch angle?
I'm actually
what is the technical? What is the
technical term? It's escaping me right now, but
that's okay. That's okay.
But it's fun. Basically it's the puborectalis muscle. There's a sling and all this kind of stuff, and so that specific angle is needed to have that masterful poop. And if you don't do it, you will have one. I mean, we all grew up obviously here with Western toilets, and it will work. But over time you may see issues, but having that Squatty Potty reinstates that angle. I was just in India in December, and it's Western toilets everywhere. And I'm obviously that's helpful for all of us just from a habit perspective, but squatting is the best. And then in terms of bidet versus toilet paper, my husband and I got our master bath redone a couple of years ago, and we specifically got a toilet with a bidet. And now that toilet is used the most out of the entire house, including my kids have their own bathroom that they share, but they come into our bathroom and use it because that damn bidet is so amazing, and it's warm water. I mean, think about it, right? Not to get too gross, but if you get poop on your hand, are you going to use a piece of paper to remove it? Or are you going to go wash your hands?
Right.
Wash your hands.
You're going to wash your hands.
Right.
So why wouldn't you do the same for your perineum?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just wash it away?
Yeah. Save the earth.
Yeah. And then, and in addition, all the paper waste and everything like that.
Yeah.
But I think in India, they have a little spray thing that you can use with the bucket or whatever.
We have the lota. We have the lota, and you use your hand. You're getting poop on your hand, but
right. But in Asian countries everywhere, they've had bidets for decades, right? Yeah. Even before the U.S. has started thinking of it as a cool novelty. But I'm a big fan of the bidet.
Awesome. Such a great episode. You've answered. One of the things about today and with social media and the internet is that there's a lot of confusion around information. You don't know what to believe. You can, and there's no right or wrong, but you can Google, do aliens exist and do aliens not exist, and get an equal number of hits arguing both sides, right? And so this is an episode where, I'm really grateful and appreciative of you coming on and just sharing some straightforward information that a lot of people might have questions about, but don't necessarily have the time or a resource or even the comfort level to
Right.
ask, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think things, especially surrounding bowel movements, are really personal and can be very embarrassing for patients, and they shouldn't be because it's just a natural part of living. Like if you eat, you poop, right? Everybody
Mm,
poops. There's a kid's book about it, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, my kids have that book actually I used to read it to them when they were little, but it's it's just a part of life and it's a fact of life, and so that's why it doesn't faze me. Like I do colonoscopies, I do all sorts of things. People are like, how can you do this? And I'm like, I'm trying to ensure your gut health, ensure your colon health, make sure, screening for colon cancer. All these things affect us, and we shouldn't be embarrassed, and we should be able to talk about these
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
in open conversation.
We're so grateful.
I
We're
love it.
so grateful.
Hmm.
We'll have to have you back on. I say this to all of our guests because all of
Yeah,
our guests are
sure.
incredible. But as you know, we have a little game we like to play as we do our wrap up portion, and we call it Ask It Forward. So if you're new to the show and you're not familiar with it, listeners, there was a previous guest who has asked a question and without knowing who this guest will be. And it's up to you, Supriya, to answer the question. And then you then get to come up with another question to leave for the next guest. We don't even know who that will be. And, we just keep on asking it forward. So are you ready to play?
Let's do it.
Okay. So this question was actually left to you by none other than Dr. Shauna Pandya, who is an aquanaut. She's lived underwater for 11 days. Incredibly accomplished person. She's been to the Arctic Circle. Check out her episode. Her question was simple, which makes the answer so difficult. What makes you happy? Besides an amazing poop, what makes you happy?
My life revolves around food a lot. I teach cooking classes. I cook almost every day. We talk a lot about the gut microbiome and how food affects it. So what makes me happy is having a bunch of friends over, making a really awesome meal, and just like sitting and interacting and eating and just living in that moment. I live for those kind of days, because the long days, like not just like a quick, thing, but like a long kind of drawn out conversations with people and eating really good food. That makes me really happy.
How European of you.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
So then you get to then ask a question forward.
Right. My question is, what role model in your life was most instrumental in shaping who you are today as a person?
That's a good one.
That is a good one. You'll have to listen to the episode that comes out after yours, or maybe two or so, for who gets to answer your question.
Perfect.
Terrific. We also like to, make sure that the people that are benefiting from our podcast are not just Seema and I from the wisdom you shared, or our listeners, but together come together and raise awareness for the causes that are important to so many of us, including the causes that are important to our guests. And in this portion, we'd like you to share a cause or organization, a charity that is important to you. And on behalf of you, for spending some time with us, Seema and I will make a contribution to that organization.
Yes. First of all, it's amazing that you guys do this. It's really generous and incredible. So thank you very much. Again, mine revolves around food and children. So there is an organization called Akshaya Patra, and they provide midday meals to children in India. And it's very regional. They have kitchens all over India, big industrial kitchens where they're cooking like thousands and thousands of meals, and then in a very sterilized, very technologically advanced kitchen, packaging them, going out to the schools, because oftentimes children, end up working because, school is not helpful. But if they're able to get the meal in school, then their parents don't have to worry about where that meal is coming from. And so good, healthy, nutritious food to help them stay in school and be productive, I think it's really important. So Akshay Patra is a very it's a cause near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, we love Akshay Patra as well. We actually got to see Dr. Deepak Chopra speak at the Austin event that we had for Akshay Patra, and it's really incredible to see the work that they do. And so I love that's what came to mind for you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This has been such an enlightening episode. We're so grateful for the time you took to spend with us on a Saturday morning. I know that your kids and Alan are waiting. Shout out to Alan. What's up, my man? And tell our audience where they can find you, what you're excited about, what's coming up for you, because I'm sure people are going to have questions, especially as a South Asian physician, that they can come to for such information that's vital to their health.
Thank you so much. Well, you can find me on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Gutsy Girl MD is my handle. My website is gutsygirlmd.com. Things that are coming up for me. I recently started a health coaching business with my nurse practitioner. It's called Healthy Roots Coaching. And we're going to be launching a masterclass hopefully by this summer. So that's coming up for me just to kind of help people with mindset and their why and figuring out what they need to do in order to change their lifestyle. I, am hopeful to have some, more media things coming out later this year as well. And, my goal is to be able to, disseminate information that is, evidence-based and it's helpful for people, and it's kind of given to them in a way that they understand it and are able to use it in practical ways, in daily life. And so that's where I am.
So good. Listeners, I'm going to give you a tip, and it's going to change your life. And this is what you got to do. Next time you're going grocery shopping, before you make your list, go to Supriya's Gutsy Girl MD Instagram and take a look at the pictures there and all of the amazing things that she's got, like a quinoa breakfast bowl and an anti-inflammatory tahini dressing and a gut-healthy mango lassi. Take a look at all those recipes, make your grocery list, and then go shopping, because the food just looks so amazing and it's making me hungry while looking at it. So it's really, really amazing page.
Thank you. And I guess one other thing is my practice website you can find. It's integratedgic.com. If you live in Massachusetts and want to see me as a patient, I'm happy to see you.